I'm John Law, this is Chasing Cars, and the Lexus LBX Morizo RR is a car we're all very excited about here at the channel because it feels a little bit naughty, like something that never should have come to be. It is, of course, the brainchild of Chairman Akio Toyoda, and it bears his racing pseudonym, that being Morizo, and RR standing for Rookie Racing, the name of his racing team. So it should be a pretty cool bit of kit. It's also only the second Lexus ever to have a three-letter name following the LFA, adding to the fact that it should be pretty special indeed. But to be honest, we don't quite understand the point of this car yet. Yes, it's a fast urban crossover, but to get to the bottom of exactly who this car's for, I brought along its cousin car, the GR Corolla, fitted with the same 8-speed automatic transmission. And in today's video, I'm hoping that comparing these two back to back will give us a better idea of exactly who the LBX is for and what it does. Plus, of course, we're going to pick a winner out of these two. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, and make sure to hit subscribe if you haven't done so already, and let's get into it. Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car. Brought to you by Budget Direct. Let's start with styling. The GR Corolla, well, we all know what it looks like. It looks like a serious beast, and it wears its intentions on its sleeve with pumped guards and those nostril flares. Not for everyone, but I think a handsome, angry looking vehicle. But the Lexus is a different kettle of fish because it's just that bit much more refined. Nicer paintwork as well. This one's got a beautiful pearlescent white color on it, and it gets bigger 19-inch alloy wheels, which fill the guards that little bit better than the Corollas in my opinion, but you can let me know down below. And under the skin, it gets pretty much all of the same stuff from the Corolla. That means it swaps its trailing arm rear suspension for double wishbones, just like the Toyota. It also gets wider tracks, so it's pumped 10 millimeters at the front, 15 millimeters at the rear, and it sits 15 mil lower than a standard LBX. Plus, it has more spot welds, 213 more, and 73% more structural adhesive. So on paper then, this thing sounds pretty serious. Pricing is another important consideration. Of course, the Lexus is a bit more expensive, but not that much more. At $76,490 before on-road costs, it's a straight $6,000 more than the GR, so 10% less. And as you'll see in a minute, it feels worth that extra cash. Other rivals you might consider instead of the LBX include things like the Volkswagen T-Roc R, maybe the Mini Countryman, and then you could step up a price bracket to cars like the Mercedes-AMG GLA 35 and BMW's hot X1 M35i. Talking about cabins, we'll first recap on the GR Corolla's interior, which I think is best described as workmanlike. It's very much a Corolla in here, and not even a particularly nice one in a lot of ways. It's got a smaller touchscreen than you'd find on the ZR range-topping regular hybrid Corolla, and materials aren't elevated beyond that. But again, not really the point of this car. It feels very much like a 90s JDM sports sedan, like the fantastic Mitsubishi Evolution and the Subaru WRX STI. There's nothing you don't need in here, there's only the things you do. For example, this manual handbrake and this lovely small diameter steering wheel with leather upholstery. Feels so good in the hands and lets you get on with the process of driving, which is the most important thing in the GR Corolla. That said, I would love to see a slightly better driving position. I'd still like to sit a bit lower than I am here, and for front passengers, your seat isn't height adjustable at all, so your head's way up in the roof, which feels like a bit of a compromise. The Corolla then is very much a car for one, and you'll see why even more when we jump in the back seat. I mean, look at it back here. I am pretty tall, 188 centimeters, and this is my driving position. I just fit behind it, but the view out is terrible. These seats are so big and bulky, and I'm not really elevated in here, so I can't see out forwards very well. I've got tiny windows, scratchy plastics, no vents back here, but there are a couple of positives, one of which is this fold-down armrest, which is actually quite nice and comfortable, has a couple of cup holders. The other slight benefit is that I don't have a center armrest here, so I can really easily access this USB-C charge point. Straight away, jumping into the Lexus, it may be smaller, but the interior feels elevated. You've got nicer materials up on the dash, nice suede with real red stitching running all the way around the cabin. You've got a larger 9.8-inch touchscreen, but crucially, you have a lot more thoughtful storage touches. We'll start with the wireless charger, which is a bit compromised because my phone falls out of it quite a lot, but when you're driving on a straight road, it's okay. Behind that though is a really nice spot for a cup of takeaway coffee or a small water bottle, and then you've got this perfect spot to put your phone upright, which I think is really clever. And then you've even got a little bit more storage down here, plus you've got a covered armrest with a second cup holder that you could pull up and hide away any valuables. It is a little bit flimsy, which doesn't feel very Lexus, but the fact that this car has so many more thoughtful storage touches, I think almost justifies the extra cost if you're using this as an everyday car. The GR Corolla feels very single-minded, very track and driving fast oriented. The LBX has this broader, more livable vibe inside. It's not all perfect though. Going to the steering wheel, the GR Corollas is definitely nicer to hold. This one has a little bit more going on. You've got these weird touch capacitive buttons that you constantly brush while you're driving that bring up things in the head-up display and on the digital driver display, kind of annoying. Then you've got the touchscreen, 9.8 inches in size, which is pretty big for a small car like this, but my goodness, the system is really terrible. Like the Corollas is a bit laggy, but this I've had all manner of problems with. Apple CarPlay, which is wireless in both cars, dropping out, strange text issues, and just a general lagginess to the whole system. You'd have to overlook that if you bought the car. Wireless CarPlay did work most of the time, so maybe you'd be able to do that. You also got USB charging ports and a way to do wired phone mirroring through those USB-Cs. And then we come to the seats, which are leather appointed and I think actually slightly nicer than the GR Corolla. You still can't get super low in this car, but because you've got more body above you, it feels like you do snuggle down just a little bit more, and that is very much true for the passenger seat, which again, no height adjust, but you do sit lower in relation to the headline, which is great and keeps you comfortable on longer journeys. And although it might be more comfortable for 2 on a long run, it's not going to be more comfortable for 5, that's for sure. Although the LBX does have a relatively nice back seat for its size. As you can see, my legs are jammed up into the seat in front of me, but it is soft, so it does yield, and there's a little bit of toe room beneath it. Plus, the way this bench is set up, I've got good under thigh support and nice backrest that is quite upright, which gives me a really good view out over the front seats. So it's actually swings and roundabouts compared to the Corolla rather than being one way or the other. Of course, you don't get a fold-down armrest because this is more Yaris-based than the larger Corolla, and you do get 2 USB-C charge points back here, but the windows don't go all the way down, and frankly, the hard scratchy materials feel really quite cheap and not particularly Lexus back here. But if you had to use it, you could do it. As the bigger vehicle, you'd expect the Corolla to have a larger boot, but that isn't actually the case. At 213 litres VDA, it's a tiny little space, way smaller than something like a Volkswagen Golf R, which really hurts the practicality of this vehicle. Don't really have much going on back here, no netted cubbies or anything, just a little bit of wet storage under the boot floor. Now, coming over to the Lexus, which, as I say, is quite a lot smaller, open the power tailgate, which is standard, nice and luxurious, helps justify the premium. You get nicer boot floor, you get a little leatherette strap here, and it goes all the way to the corners. Plus, on paper, it's a bigger boot as well at 266 litres. So, although it doesn't look very different in size, actually, the Lexus is more practical despite being a smaller car. Let's talk running costs, because both cars have effectively the same powertrain and they're covered by a 5-year unlimited kilometre warranty by both manufacturers. Servicing is also due every 6 months and 10,000 Ks, reflecting that these cars are probably going to be driven pretty hard. Now, where things start to change is in the service costs. Toyota charges $4,206 for 5 years of servicing, the first 7 of which are capped price, but Lexus charges a whole lot more money, $695 per service, costing $6,950 over 5 years, which I think you'll agree is pretty expensive. As for fuel consumption, both require 98 RON premium unleaded, and the Lexus is a little bit more frugal on petrol, which turned out to be the case in our testing as well, with the GR Corolla using about 0.2 litres per 100 Ks more. The only other problem with these cars is that they have a tiny little 50-litre fuel tank, and that means when you're getting the most out of them, you're going to have to go only about 350 Ks between fill-ups. Before we get to driving the LBX, I want to point out what I think might be one of the key differentiators in the way these two cars drive, and it's the wheel and tyre package. In the Corolla's case, we have these stiff, sporty Yokohama Advan Sport V601 tyres, and they're quite a small size, 235/40 R18s. So they have a small rotational diameter. Now we come over to the Lexus, and it has a much bigger wheel and tyre package. Firstly, it's a 19-inch alloy wheel, plus you've got 45 series tyres on the same 235 width, and they're Continentals. Now, what that means is this car has functionally higher gear ratios. So let's take it out on the road and see how that affects the driving experience. Continuing in the order of the day, we're going to jump into this GR Corolla first and head out, and I'll give you my impressions. This is my first time experiencing the 8-speed automatic transmission, and funnily enough, although it's easier than having to drive a manual around town, it actually makes you notice this car's low-speed shortcomings a lot more. It really brings them to the fore. Things like elevated road noise, the chuntery grumbliness of that 3-cylinder engine, and of course that really stiff, uncompromising ride quality. I'm not going to say bone breaking, but it certainly does jiggle your spine around. It feels just like the interior, like a 90s performance sedan, a rally-bred rocket like the Mitsubishi Evo and also the Subaru WRX STI. It has that tight rebound, firm spring, absolute and utter control, that feeling of, total tied downedness, if you will. Something that really defines the Corolla experience and makes it a very different proposition to the Honda Civic Type R, which has more fluidity thanks to its adaptive dampers, and the Golf GTI, which feels a few shades less serious and a few shades less involving because of it. But then, of course, it's easier to live with every day. The real magic of the GR Corolla is when you get it out to a good fun road and you get to go into sport drive mode. There we go. Wakes the transmission up a little bit. Then we get to go expert mode, basically ESC Sport, and the car just really wakes up and comes alive. And it feels like this is exactly what the 8-speed auto in this car has been tuned for. It shifts down really impressively under braking. Oh, and the car rotates so beautifully. You got various modes for your all-wheel drive system, the GR4 torque split, all those sorts of things. It's not quite as obvious as it was in the earlier GR products with track, gravel and normal rather than sport and telling you what the torque split is, but you can feel it working your way down there. The steering is so crisp, so sharp. The brake pedal, so confidence inspiring. You can really dial this car's attitude in on the brakes, come into a corner, little trail brake, slides around. We're at our private test track here at Chasing Cars, so I can drive like this. Again, it's just so dialed in. Such a fun car, and although I would say I prefer the manual, I do think the auto does give that broader appeal. As I said, it's not super well tuned around town, but out here on a good stretch of twisty road, it does a very good job. And that's even without taking manual control, which you can do via the paddles or via the stick in the center. And Toyota's reversed its typical polarity for shifting to make it so that when you brake, you push the stick away from you, as it should be. Now, I will mention the automatic transmission because it's linked up to that really angry, fizzy little 1.6 litre turbo petrol 3-cylinder, the G16E that we all know and love. And here it now makes 220 kilowatts across the range, which is 15 kilowatts more than you get in the LBX. And it's also 10 Newton meters up, so 400 Newton meters. But in the real world, the GR Corolla has this extra sense of punch and a little bit more tractability. And I think that's because of the wheel and tyre package. And the manifestation of that larger tyre size is that this car redlines, and it does have a proper bang into it redline. It's not a soft cutout, but it redlines at 101 k's an hour, where the Corolla does so at 96. I think that's just a tiny little change, a tiny little difference, but it makes much more of a difference than you might think when you're trying to drive this Lexus with a bit of enthusiasm. On that subject, you can immediately feel in the LBX its softer edge. There's an immediate extra moment of body roll. You've got lighter steering, even in sport mode with everything firmed up, and it just takes a little bit of the edge off that front end. So you don't feel as immediately confident. However, when you get all the settings correct, pop your car in sport mode, hit the all-wheel drive mode, which goes to sport all-wheel drive, and then go to traction control off once, which puts you into expert mode, it does start to come alive. You definitely have to push it harder than the GR. It doesn't give you everything right away, but there's still plenty of talent in this car. And I think that soft edge makes it almost a little bit more fun, or perhaps a little bit more natural in some of its responses. Where the GR is such a serious feeling machine, this thing feels just that little bit more friendly, a little bit more approachable. Speaking of, you can't get the same kind of intense drive out of the rear end that you can in the GR Corolla, even though this car has the same trick, limited slip differential at the rear, the Torsen item. It's not an electrical one, it's a torque sensing diff, so it is all the same equipment, but just tuned to be a little bit more civilized. And as you slow down, as we're doing here, come out of sport mode, change up a few gears, what you notice is the LBX Morizo RR has this lovely bandwidth. The damping, where in the GR Corolla, it's firm, uncompromising, jiggly and stiff and borderline unpleasant, certainly for your passengers. The LBX has this beautiful, mature feeling about it. It breathes over bumps in the city, and you don't feel the concrete expansion joints like I was expecting you would. It's really clever, even though it doesn't have adaptive dampers, and you might expect that at this price on a performance car, but in this case, Lexus has proved, well, you don't always need them, do you? It rides better than the standard LBX. I'm genuinely serious. That car was great fun to drive in the twisties, but really did feel like it needed a couple of steps knocked off the spring and rebound stiff settings. But the LBX Morizo RR, it's got, this fluidity and loveliness to it. So it begs the question why it doesn't have all of the GR Corolla's feel in all areas. For example, the steering, which even in sport mode, I find to be a little on the, not so much the weighting is too light, but it has this extra level of squidge that you don't get in the Corolla. The Corolla is so sharp, so precise, so accurate, and this car just has a little bit of an extra moment of breathability before it does what you expect it to. The brake pedal's the same. It's a little bit softer. Not a huge deal, but you can definitely notice it. And with a little bit less power and torque, even though we timed them at pretty much identical 0 to 100k an hour times, which were slower than the claim, I might add, at 5.6 seconds for both cars, it just doesn't have that fizziness. Again, I think it comes down to the effective gear ratios with the larger wheel and tyre package in this car. So to sum up the driving experience then, it's kind of what you expect. Lexus has refined that GR Corolla and GR Yaris recipe in the LBX Morizo RR, and it has made a more accomplished vehicle, one with a little bit less focus, one that you could rely on as a car to drive you around town every day, put your mum, your dad, your kids, older kids probably. I wouldn't want to put young ones in the back so much because there's not much space. But you know, it's that sort of car you could put someone who's not a car enthusiast in and it wouldn't bother them. The GR Corolla is an event. And I guess that's the luxury of the LBX Morizo RR, that ability to have extra breadth, extra sensitivity. I just wish it had slightly better touchscreen, because trying to adjust the climate control, for example, up while you're moving can be a real pain in the bum. And yeah, that extra clarity that the GR Corolla has, I reckon they could port that across into this with some brake pedal and some shift adjustments, because it doesn't quite do what you want it to do all the time when you're really hammering, even though this gearbox is smoother around town in tuning than the Corollas. So a couple of little complaints about the LBX there, but yeah, still a pretty impressive package, and one of those things that you're just glad exists. Time then for a verdict. We'll start with perhaps the easier question, which is, what is the Lexus LBX Morizo RR? Well, I think it's a delightfully niche vehicle that is so much fun to drive in the city. Not quite as sharp and crisp as the GR Corolla on a country road, but still really satisfying. That said, I think Lexus could make a couple of changes to the Morizo RR without compromising its comfort factor. Those would be things like a slightly heavier steering feel, crisper brake response, and a recalibrated transmission logic for when you're driving sportily. That said, as good as the Corolla is to drive at full gas, it's the Lexus LBX I'd rather take home, because it's more comfortable, feels more grown up, and very much worth that $6,000 upcharge. That is, if you can get your hands on one, because there are a limited quantity of LBX Morizo RRs coming to Australia. And anyway, if it was my money, what I'd think I'd do is go for the absolute most affordable GR product, which is the GR Yaris. I love that car so much. It's smaller, it's lighter, that bit more enjoyable. That said, all of these products with this powertrain and drivetrain setup are really, really fun. So I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section down below. Make sure to hit subscribe to Chasing Cars if you haven't done so already. And as always, thank you very much for watching.